Welcome everyone to our discussion of Darkei HaTalmud. We are now approaching Siman Tet. He says, "Le'olam b'kol baya shetavo b'Gemara having mistaka." Whenever you have a question in the Gemara, he says you always have to look at keep certain things in mind. That what l'dasadi haboy. You always have to look at the two sides of the question. Ki hine hashoel lo yishal ela kashiyesh lo ba'oso baya panim lakan or panim lakan. He'll only ask a question if it has two sides. Va'oso hapanim haim shkulim etzlo. And also those two sides are equal. That's what he says. So for instance, we in our favorite Gemara Bava Kama, right? It says told the same. Gemara has told the same kiyotze bo o eno kiyotze bo. They told us of all the avos. Do they have the same din or don't they have the same din? Okay, that's two sides. Now he says that those two sides have to be equal. Why? Because if it's unequal and one has more reason to be true than the other, higher pashitos solo sotzad, and the pashitos would be on one side, right? Then nikra chelki soser. So the chelki soser means it's A or B. One, they both can't be true. It's either told the same kiyotze bo or lav kiyotze bo. Okay, so we had a lot of problems with that in the Gemara, as you mentioned, because as we may remember, the Rush had terrible problems with that because it doesn't seem that iboye is shoko. How could you say that something is a tolda and not be kiyotze bo? If a tolda means, like in our lashon here of a syllogism, right, and a mamitzina, let's say. So if Karen, for instance, is the yad, it's written in the Torah, and it's kavanah lahazik, and be'ita, kicking, is a tolda, and it's equal to the ab, to a memitzina, because it's also kavanah lahazik. So then the result of two things being equal is that they should have the same predicate. In other words, the din should be the same. So how could it possibly be that the Gemara had an equal iboye that the told us for yotzi, because the yotzi and lav kiyotzi? It's not equal. Obviously, the kiyotzi bo. There's no place to say lav kiyotzi bo.
Right, because if it's lav kiyotzi, it's not a tolda. Right.
It's not a tolda. And the examples that they bring of the lav kiyotzi bo is from Tumo, which is a different type of tolda altogether. It's not a tolda that comes through a mamitzinu. It's a tolda of degrees. You know, like you touch the dead person, and then that which touched the dead person touches something else. It's a question of degrees. Like you light a fire, and the fire heats up a pot, and then the pot heats up the water, and the water heats up and then you put the ladle in the water, and you put in the kli. That's a question of degrees. It's a different use of the word tolda, which doesn't seem to be shaykh b'chlal when you're talking about avos. Okay, but anyway, that's what he says here. Whenever you see nibor in the Gemara, it should be shakel. The question should be 50-50. And the Peshitus brings proof to one side or the other, because he says if one side is obvious, like in this case, they should all be told us kiyotzibo. So what type of question was it? It's obvious. The question is obvious that there's a decision that has to be made because both sides are equal. So that's what he says. Now, ulifami mishol shoel mipnei she'eno yodea klal im oso adava muta o aser v'shoel stam. Sometimes there is a shayla in the Gemara that's called a shayla stam. I would think like Ketzad Naragdim if they kala, Now remember the Ramchal also made the difference between a Sheila and an Iboya. So this is a simple statement. In that type of question, you don't have to look at the two sides. Omnam, zos hashela eno shelas chacham ela shelas tam. It's not called a shelas chacham, it's called a shelas tam, a simple question. So normally we would expect to find shelas chachamim where there's two sides of the question. Ukashir yutzadim haiboye meforashim, when the Gemara spells out the two sides of the question, lo yichosh hashoel leforsham stari. Ukashir hem nelamim yeforsh hashoel o batalman. Just the opposite. Ukashir you had stadim haboya mufurashim, when they are obvious, then lo yichosh hashoel leforsham. Then the questioner will not spell them out. Ukashir hem ne'alamin, but if they're more subtle and hidden, so then yeforsham hashoel o balatalman. So then the person who asks will have to spell it out, like in our Gemara, right? It spells out. Are they like kiyot sibo, and it brings the whole thing like Shabbos, so they're not kiyot sibo like Tumah. They have to spell it all out because the question is not very clear. Even when you do spell it out, we said the question is not clear, but that's what he's saying. Ulechein yesh lecha lehistakel kasher nosan lahem mitzius hashoel umeforav shosam. So once ma hainu mistapkin behem shahotzruch laomo. So when you see people spelling things out, the two sides of the question, so you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, what was the problem if they had to spell it out? Okay, so like in that case here in Baba Kama, it's not clear why you would say, told to say lav kiyot sebo. It seems that you learn from Binyanat, Mukhrat, that everything has to be kiyot sebo. So they have to spell it out because there is a possibility that these toldos are toldos that look like Tumah. How? Okay, you're going to have to explain that, but that's why it had to be spelled out, because it was not clear. Okay. So that's his little explanation of Sheilas. He breaks it down like in the Ramchal does into the simple Sheila and the two-sided Sheila. And he says the two-sided Sheila, normally, if it's clear, then they won't spell out the two sides. But if it's problematic, they will. And if it is spelled out, you have to say, well, what was the problem? They had to spell it out. Okay.
So if you don't see it spelled out, you should realize yourself that you're supposed to understand what the two sides are.
Exactly. You have to spell it out yourself.
Right.
Okay. It may be simple to them and not to us, which happens too often, but that's the reality. Whenever you see a question, you should spell out both sides. Okay. Now he's going to discuss when the Gemara says ihachi, if so. Okay, if so. U'la'olam b'chol lashon ihachi hanoed b'talmud yesh lecha lishmor techila ki kol hamaksha b'lashon ihachi kavanas lomar im kein kamo shamarta tikshi lecha zeh. V'im eno kain nira she'ein lo kusha. He says the first rule is like this. When someone says ihachi, he's saying, if what you're saying is true, then I have the question. Now, if you did not say what you're saying, then I would not have the question, which means that the ihachi is predicated on what you said. It's a direct result of what you said. If you wouldn't have said that position or that explanation, I would have never asked the following kasha. Okay? That's what he says. That's clear?
Yep.
Good. So he says like that. So if that's true, you always have to look and say, wait a minute, how did what person A say create the kasha of person B? What was it in his language that produced that kasha? Okay? Because it only was created from that teretz, let's say. So what was it that produced it? Without it, it wouldn't have been a problem. Now, omnam, lashon base here, omnam lashon ihachi hanohag ala rovu. He says, this is how ihachi is normally, generally used, and the rove is used in Talmud. Is kesha Maksha, Muksha, Teretz, Hakusha, Harishona, Shehikshu Kenegdo. It's when the person who had the difficulty gives the teretz to a certain kasha. In other words, B asks A kasha, and A gets out of it. Okay? He's mataretz the kasha, Rishona. Vehine hu chashav lahatzil nafsho b'teretzahu. And Mr. A thinks that he's now out of the problem with that teretz. V'nolda lo kusha acheres mimenu be'inyan shelo yimalei miyoso kusha. And now what happens is, because of the teretz he gave to that original kasha, a new kasha comes out. O min akusha rishona, o me'ez akusha shniya. In other words, I hope that's clear. Mr. A has made a statement. Mr. B asked him a kasha. Mr. A metaretz the kasha, and now what happens is Mr. A says, well, now according to what you said, ihachi, the first question is problematic still, or I have a new question on it. Okay, so you thought you got out of the woods with this teretz. Now I'll either bring back my first kasha or bring you a second kasha. So that's what he says. He says, Mr. A solved the problem. And he thought he's out of the problem by giving that teretz. But now there's a new kasha that comes out of his teretz. Omin hakusha rishona, o mizos hakusha shniya, or from the first problem that was brought up, or from a new problem. Yeah. V'hine nofel mamashi boreach al derech hanas min ha'asi polo apach. So now he falls into a problem. He thought he was going to get out of a problem. He actually falls into another problem, the one he's escaping from. Now, so that's what he says. He says normally it's not just a person making a statement and someone saying, well, if that's true, then you have the following difficulty. That can happen. But he says normally what happens, the scenario is that the person is already mataretz the kasha, and it's on the kasha that the ihachi comes. He says that's most of the times that would happen. That's what happens. Okay?
Okay.
Now he says, the im yomro lo hamaksha ihachi, if the one who's asking the kasha says ihachi, the original person wrote slama b'shlema im lo tamar li came, which means, hey, it would have been great if you wouldn't have said that answer. Right? Lo ekshalacha mashan yirotzel hakshos mineged. Now he's saying like this. If you wouldn't have given that teretz, then I wouldn't have the second problem. Lo ekshalacha mashan yirotzel hakshos mineged. Ata nehi nami sheyeshaya kenegdecha kusha rishona, aval ata shetaratzta harishona nolad lo mimenu kusha cheretz. Im kein ma ho'il lecha. So he says, now you're in real trouble because you haven't solved my first kasha, and you haven't solved, and the second kasha just got you into more trouble. So what good is what you did? Okay?
Yeah, but what's the difference between Gimel and Aleph? In Aleph he's saying, Yesh l'cholish metchil, Ihachi is saying, the first one is saying just, you said a statement, based on your statement I'm going to ask you a kasha. And in the third one, he's saying that you asked a kasha, I asked you a kasha, you gave a teretz, and now based on your teretz, I'm going to say that, first of all, the first kasha I asked you was still a kasha. And second of all, now that you gave me your teretz, I have another kasha on you.
Right, so,
okay.
so your second teretz is no...
Right.
Exactly. So you haven't solved anything. My first kasha remains because your second kasha just got you into more trouble. So what did you gain?
Right. Right.
That's the scenario.
Right.
וצריך אתה לשמור בזה הלשון, כי זו הקושה הנולדת אתה המוקשה בלשון יהכי, בלאו החינמי עומדת הקושה. What does that mean? So now you have to, I don't know, he says like this, you have to be very careful and realize that this second kasha, that was the result of your teretz, balav hachinami omedes hakusha. Even without that second kasha that I'm asking on your teretz, the first kasha still remains. Va'od ki le'olam zos hakusha rotz l'makusha ihachi miuchedes al zeh. And he said, this is peculiar or particular for this. Rotz l'mar ki omar b'shleima lididi nicha ela lididach kasha. Let's see what that means there. I thought I knew what it meant. I have to go over it again. וצריך אתה לשמוע בזה הלשון, כי זוז הקושה הנולדת אתה המוקשה בלשון יהכי, the new kasha that is brought up by the יהכי, בלאו החינמי עומדת הקושה, I guess the first one, ועוד כי לעולם זוז הקושה, oh, that's another point, I think. I believe that's another point. Okay.
Yeah, so what's the first one? He's saying,
yeah, we're going to work on this together. I'm not doing too well this week, okay. That's when you think you understand something. Then you go over it again, and then you have to clarify. Okay, let's just see if that works. Sorry, bullets playing around.
What's that equal sign there?
Yeah, I just, that's how you have to get rid of it. When you make a new box, you have to get rid of it that way. But it's not going away for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, anyway, let's just get inside there, figure out the formatting. He says like this: "V'tzarech ata lishmo b'zeh haloshen ki zos hakusha hanolas ata hamak shebeloshen yihachi v'lav hachinami yomedes kusha." What does that mean? V'lav hachinami yomedes kusha. Hakusha. I don't know what to say there.
And it sounds like you're saying balav hachi, even without the ihachi, and it's funny we're using the same words, I medes hakusha.
Which one? Only the first one, maybe, and not the second one. One second. So it's always one way. It says, if you wouldn't have said Bishleim in Tomar Li came, excuse me, Lo Tamri Li, if you didn't say that, so Lo Ikshalecha Mashani Vitzel Hakshos Kenegdech, I would not have the problem, right? But Ata Nehi Nami Shishayar Kenegdech Hakusha Rishona. Now, not only is the first question stand, אבל אתה שתרצת ראשונה נובע לך kusha cheres, ממנה kusha cheres. So now that you gave me the teretz, now you have another kasha. So im came what'd you do? That I understand, right? So he's saying, look, that we understand, right? We said, what did you accomplish? Your second, your teretz didn't produce anything. It just gave you more problems. So now, not only do you have my first problem, But your second problem, now you created even more problems with the teretz that you gave me. So you've done really nothing. So now what does he want with this? V'tzarech ata lishmor b'zeh haloshin ki zos hakusha hanoledes ata hamuksha b'loshin ihachi b'lav hachi nami amedes hakusha. Now I understood what that meant was that you just have to be, that's an explanation. In other words, you always have to know that the original kasha still stands. That's what he wants to tell you.
Yeah, but he's not referring to the original kasha. He's referring to the new kasha. That is, I don't know, is he referring to the original kasha or kizois hakasha neledes ata hamukeshas b'loshen hachi? It sounds like he's saying neledes ata is the one that was just created now. What does it mean now? Now means after
the second
the second one, which is asked hamukeshas b'loshen ihachi, which is asked in the ihachi type of question. That kasha is there anyway.
Which one? The first one. That's what I was learning. That's how he's learning. You know what I'm saying? Because he said, over here he says, when you say Yihachi, B'Shlema, if you wouldn't have said that, it'd be fine. I wouldn't have asked you my problem. But now that you're saying what you're saying, now this new teretz you gave me is so bad that now you just put yourself into worse problems from either another source or the same, so it doesn't really matter. So I think what he's trying, now this is a modification, not a modification, it's explanation. He's saying what you have to be careful and analyze here is that the second, even without the second kasha, the first kasha exists.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
I think that's what he's trying to
say. Right.
That's number one. Number two, va'od, now this is a new point, you see. Okay, this is a new point. He says, "Va'od." I don't know how to label it. We'll see. Va'od ki la'olam zos ha'akushya rotz lamar ihachi miucheres al zeh. Now, I think what it means, it's only on one side. The kasha ihachi always presumes that Mr. A is being attacked. Rotz lamar ki oma, that the attacker says bishlema lididinicha elidach kusha. That's his other point here. When you say ihachi, there's a presumption that everything is fine with my shita. But since you, with your shita, since you said what you said, you have the following kasha. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. He says, it's miyuchad against Mr. A. Rotzlomar, ki omar bishlema, the Makshan says, bishlema lididinicha lididach, Mr. A, you have a terrible problem. Now he says, ve'im hi mishutefes, if it should turn out that this kasha also rebounds on Mr. the Makshan, right, Mr. B, ve'im hi mishutefes, hine efsha lo lahashiv ulididach minicha. So then the Mr. A will boomerang the question on Mr. B. He says, wait a minute, the problem is not only a problem on me, it's a problem on you too. Okay?
You have a typo, by the way, you have a typo there. It should save an extra dollar in the word lididach. It's missing the dollar. In the bold lididach, at the end of the third word, to the end of the line.
Let's see if I can put that in. First we'll try to get English, right? Oops, where am I? There we go. We got it. Okay. Yeah. Ki oma bishlema lididach. No.
No, wrong one. The one. Next line.
Oh, it's the next line.
It says liyatcha instead of lididach.
Okay, just one second. ואם היא משותפת, הנה אפשר להשיב ולדידך. לדידך, is it?
It's supposed to be the dal before the yud. No, wrong place. It's supposed to be before the yud. Oh, a dalad.
Dalid.
Before the yud.
Dalid chav, no?
Right, yeah. So you have an extra yud in there.
There we go. Is that right? Okay. Well, lididach minich. Okay? So let's get the logic he's saying. He's saying that what the person who's asking the kasha of ihachi should really not have the kasha on himself. It should be a kasha that's specifically directed at the person who's asking the kasha on. Because if it also is on him, then Mr. A there will just bounce and say, wait a minute, Mr. B, you have the same kasha on yourself. And then what will happen is the way that Mr. B has to get out of it, Mr. A will get out of it himself. Right?
Yeah, so you're saying that sometimes the makshin could ask a kasha that will be shvar on himself also. And he's saying an ihachi is always that the maksha is asking it and it's not shvar on himself. He said because
That's right.
the maksha is saying, according to my shita, this is not a question, but according to what you just said, it's a question. And then the one who's being asked, the Taratzin, is going to say, well, according to you, it's shvar also, and I'll get himself out of it. Or according to you, it doesn't make sense. I'll get himself out of it that way.
Right. So it should be only a one-way kash. If it's not,
right,
then you're in problems.
That's interesting. We'll have to see if it's really ihachi, if every hachi is that way. Okay.
Ihachi. These are iyum pieces in ihachi. Okay. Okay. Let me see. I have to think about how to format this properly. Okay, let's just do it that way for a second, okay? So he says it has to be miucheres. Okay, now this I don't think should be should not be a new letter here. Okay, let's just play around this little. Okay. V'hine be'es kazos kavanas hamaksha lahamid svaraso asher he mineged el hamataretz. The kavana of the maksha is to set up his svara against the person, Mr. A, who gave the teretz. Okay. O l'kayim kusha rishona shiach shelo, or to makayim the first kasha. Okay. So when the person asking Ihachi has one of two scenarios. Either he has a position that he wants to maintain, and the Ihachi is going to knock out his opponent, right? Or the Ihachi will knock out the teretz of his opponent and bring back the original kasha.
Right.
Okay, that's what he says. V'hine be'ez kazos kavanas hamaksha la'amid svaras asher hi mineged el hamataretz. He wants to establish his own svara and knock out the tartzin. Or l'kayim kusha rishona shelo, or to establish that first kasha, to say your teretz is no teretz, and therefore my first kasha goes back into place. Now he says, "U'lifamin ein kavanas hamaksha b'zeh." But sometimes the kavana of the ihachi person is not. Rak lahoros u'netos degrei chavero v'lo k'dei lahamid svarato. Sometimes just to knock out his friend completely, and not to set up his own position. So you have to know how people are arguing. Is there two sides to the debate, and one person is trying to knock out the second side? Or really there's only one side of the debate, and this person is trying to knock out that side. Okay, let's see. L'fanim ein kavanas hamaksha b'zeh, rak l'horos u'netos, I guess, divrei ha'chavero, v'lo k'dei lahamid svarto. He has, the maksha is not trying to set up a new position, he's just trying to knock out the person who's presenting the position. Rak al derech manavsha. He's saying, im tomar ze kasha, the im tomar ze gam kan kasha. So what he's saying is I'm not trying to defend my shita. I'm just saying that if you say what you said, you're going to have a kasha. And if you give that teretz, you're also going to have a kasha. So there's really no way that you can turn. Umizeh hatam tzarech ata lishmor, and because of this, you have to be careful. Ki hagdama asher yibona aleha hamaksha ihachi shelo tiyeh hagdama mufrachas. Wow. He says that that you have to be aware that when a person asks ihachi, it can never be from a premise that must be. He always has. What does that mean? Hine az lo yachol hamak shalom la b'shlema l'didi. If there's only one way, ki behechrach hu lo dot lecha. I think what he's saying is the kasha can't. If the kasha is a knockout kasha. One second. Vim kain eno prati zos hakusha rak mishutevish l'shneihem. No good.
That's where are you?
Now I'm just reading here. Maybe we'll stop here.
Okay.
I'm over here in Vav.
Okay,
maybe we'll stop
right.
here, and I'll do more homework. Again, I thought I knew what we were talking about, and we have to work a little harder. Okay, Beseda. Let's stop here. We'll pick it up next week.
Okay.
And we'll do two things. We'll have to review our Higayon, and we'll have to do the
Right.
over here at this point. Okay. Have a great week.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, take care.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Goodbye.